I don't know how many kiddies I have with me this morning, but I'm going to talk about faith, and so that's relevant to us all. What I'd like us to take away from this morning is one phrase that I'm going to repeat, and that phrase is that Jesus is there with you. I'm going to read a Bible story first, and then I'm going to ask Oliver to show you a clip, and then I'll talk to you about it after. The Bible passage is Matthew 14, verses 22 to 36. Jesus walks on the water. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went upon a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." Okay, I'm going to tell you or speak to you about 3 different things from that Bible passage and from that story. So, point number 1. Jesus was walking on the water in the midst of the storm. Imagine the storm. This is my version of the storm. Clouds, lightning, waves, boom, thunder. A little bit like the storm we had the other night, okay? But I want you to imagine that this storm actually represents all the things that you struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so it could be the things that you find really scary. It could be the things that you find are so much bigger than you that you can't cope with them because you feel so small. It could be things that you feel you have no control over. So this storm can represent all of those things. However, in the midst of that storm, Jesus was right there in the middle of it. And he is right there with you, right in the middle of whatever you are finding difficult. Peter and the disciples thought they were alone. Jesus had told them to go off by themselves onto the lake, and he would follow them later. So they felt alone and they felt afraid. But they weren't alone. Jesus was there with them all along. In verse 27, it says, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." We need to have the faith to believe that Jesus is with us even when things feel difficult, even when we feel alone, lonely, or when we're struggling. Jesus is there with us. Point 2. Peter asks for something that he alone could not do or achieve. He was just a man. He knew who Jesus was, though. He knew that he was the Lord. He says this, "Lord, if it is you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." Peter had worked out who Jesus was. He knew that he was God. And he knew that only God had the power over wind, sea, and all of nature, including the storm. Therefore, he knew that only God could walk on water. He knew that God was there. Jesus was there with him. So he had the faith to step out of the boat and trust that Jesus was going to be there with him. The question is, do you know Jesus? Do you know who he is? Do you know that he is your God? Only when you know that will you have the faith to step out and do things that feel really impossible for you. Peter knew that Jesus was there. He knew Jesus was God. He had that knowledge and he had that faith. But he was still a man. Number 3. He was still a man. So he still saw the waves, the thunder, the lightning, all the things that terrified him. He suddenly felt afraid again and he began to sink into the water. And you will do the same. Sometimes you will fail. Sometimes you will not have the faith. And sometimes you will feel like you too are sinking into all your difficulties. But that is okay. That's normal. We all do it. And you know why it's okay? Because Jesus is there with you. The Bible says in verse 31, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. That's a great word. Immediately, Jesus. Okay? So Peter's problem was he suddenly had no faith. And Jesus says, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Peter admitted it though. As soon as he saw the wind, the waves, the scary things around him, he admitted he'd lost his bottle, he'd lost his faith, and he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately, Jesus saved him. It is okay to bottle it. It's okay to lose our faith sometimes, but admit it, and immediately Jesus will be there to save you. I want you to finally remember this. I told you it was short. Jesus is there in all your problems. Jesus is there when you have faith in him to be brave and to step out. But Jesus is there immediately when you feel your faith is failing you. That's all I have.